Hello folks, and welcome to the channel, or welcome back. And you probably wonder how I did last Sunday on the track in Zolder. And there's one word for it, and that's called lousy. Okay, I had a great time. It was great to be amongst the friends. The break times were great, but actually during the runs, I had several issues, despite the fact that I really prepared the car. So in this video, I'm going to talk you through some of those things, and I'm going to show you some footage while I was driving as well. And then the issues that we need to fix on this car. I left Sunday morning at 5 o'clock, and I arrived at around 7. So I got my spot in the paddock and unloaded. And there were a lot of people there already. I thought I would have been the first one, but I wasn't. And then you have your normal proceedings. You basically do all your paperwork. So right here is the registration, and we are getting a transponder to see which car is making most of the noise. Because with the transponder, everybody knows where you are on the track, and also the transponder is used to identify you if your car is making too much noise.
I've been racing before, but it's a very, very, very long time ago. I was racing in the early 80s with Formula Fords. So it's about 40 years ago. And this is my first time in a Formula Ford since 1984.
So after I prepared the car and getting ready for the first run, and as you can see, we had a lot of cars. There were about, I think, near to 50 cars on the track, and that's a hell of a lot. A bit of all kinds. Nevertheless, once I got on the track in the first run, I took it fairly easy. The first two runs, or the first two laps, were under the yellow flag, so everybody gets to know the track a bit. You can warm up the tires, and then we could start. However, I took it a little bit slow just because I wasn't sure about the noise my engine is making. And you might remember from the previous video that we actually prepared an additional muffler as an extension on the existing muffler. So I kept my RPMs down to about 3,500 to 4,000 RPMs, not even 4 actually. So it was a bit of slow driving, but luckily I had a good gearing ratio in the gearbox, and that you can see in a previous video. So my gear ratios were very small on my forward gear, so I could still pick up some speed. So once we got back to the paddock after the first run, which was without any problems, but I couldn't really get my car into its power band because I had to stay below 3,500, 4,000 RPMs. So I prepared the car, I checked the wheel nuts, all the normal things you do again for the next run. So I decided on the next run, actually, to crank up the RPMs. I was told that I have to tape off my old numbers because I'm driving with number 8 and they are confused. So that's what we'll do. And I did. The consequence was that I got a black flag after about 2 laps. They have 2 detectors along the road, and I know where they are, so I was slowing down, but they also have a roving one. So that is the one that I didn't know where it was, so they picked me up. I was pulled aside, black flag. They came to me, I was sanctionized, and I got a 99.2 decibels, where only 98 is allowed. So I went back to the pit. There's nothing else I could do. So if I would have that problem twice on that day, then I would really be in trouble, because then you can no longer drive for the whole day. I had 99.2 decibels this time, so I was pulled off the track. If it happens one more, it's done for the day. So we have to take it easy. Anyway, I got the car ready again for the next run. And I decided to keep my RPMs below that limit of the maximum noise level. And I knew that was between 3,500 and 4,000. That's where I was initially. But that means that I can't accelerate as fast as the other cars. So on the straight stretch, there was no way I could accelerate fast enough and keep up. If I had enough time or length of the track, then I could get to higher speeds, but certainly not the speeds I anticipated. I mean, 140, 160 clicks an hour is really not what I wanted to have I was aiming at 190 and so on the straight stretch, but okay, that didn't happen. So the only way I could keep up with the others was to corner fast. And I like to corner fast, and this car is pretty good in cornering. It really sticks to the ground. So that's what I was doing, cornering fast. So, and that way I could catch up with the others. Now there's one turn just past the finish line to the left, which isn't all that difficult, but it's a bit of a tricky one. I mean, at least I find them a tricky. You have to be in the right line and then have to hit it at the proper apex. So you drive as close as possible as you can to the concrete wall, and then you turn in very softly, and then you go straight out because it's pretty wide after that. I turned in, I was doing around 140. Unfortunately, at that time, I didn't have my GoPro on anymore, and I was not in the right line, and I was going a bit too fast, and I took a bit too much of a sharp curve, corner, and the rear end, well, it gave way, and I started to spin. I had a double spin. I slammed the brakes, I decoupled immediately, turned my steering wheel over, so I almost spun twice around the front wheels, which was really good, so I was not bouncing off the track. And then when it almost stopped, I let the car roll out, and I ended up in the, pedals on the side. And the engine was stalled, so I had to start it a couple of times, and then I got going again, and I continued. But of course, yeah, it was no more fun. I got lucky because somebody that was behind me, and he's a real good driver, did see it coming. He anticipated for it, so he was able to avoid me, because if he would have hit me, I wouldn't have been here now. So I got the car back in the pit, and I did my normal routine checks. My battery is as good as empty, 18%. Luckily, I have a spare one. Now, I did make a serious spin last time, so hopefully that doesn't happen again. Then I filled up the gasoline tank and I checked the oil. We did do all the normal checks again, and then we have like an hour rest before we would do the last run. But when I came back to the car, I saw a little puddle under the car. Not a big one, but a very small little puddle. And it smelled like gasoline. So I touched under the car, and I had gasoline underneath the car. That is a red flag for me. You don't drive with a gasoline leak. That's too dangerous for yourself and the others, so I couldn't run in the fourth run. I also noticed that I had a small oil leak in between the shaft coming from the clutch towards the gearbox. So that seal most likely is now leaking as well. So now I'm stuck with two leaks. I'm having a fuel leak, and I'm having actually a oil leak. Those things need to be fixed. So that was it for me for that day. So I couldn't do anything else anymore. So the fuel leak was right here. Now it's fairly dry, although I can still smell it. I'm going to have a quick check, but of course I'm not going to disassemble everything today. That will be for the next video. This is really soaking wet. So I think we found already the fuel leak. So it's not the fuel tank, but it's actually the connection right here, which is leaking. You can see it on my fingers how wet it is. So, man, I should have checked that on the track, but I didn't because I had so many other worries. You can also see on the panel on the bottom here where we had the fuel actually coming out while we were driving, because otherwise it wouldn't go this far backwards. So I could guess I must have had that leak already fairly early in one of the runs, or maybe it happens just after we hit the pedals after the spin. So let's have a look inside, and you can see the hose going down there, and that's where it connects to the fuel tank, and it's all wet on the bottom. And that complete hose is soaked, and the whole setup as it is here is really not how it should be done. There should be one hose. So it was on this car before. I didn't pay attention to it when I prepared the car. Next time I will pay attention to it. This is where the gearbox meets the clutch housing. And you can see all the way there in the bottom that we have some oil as well. And that's most likely because the seal on that shaft going to the gearbox leaks. After the spin I ended up in the pebbles, and this is the result of that. So the nose in front here is damaged slightly. It's not a big deal, this is just polyester, but it is work again. I started to look on the back of the car to see on how I'm going to remove the gearbox and the bell housing from the engine. I need to get to the clutch because I need to do some work on the clutch. I probably will change the disc as well, and maybe a pressure plate, which is a little bit less hard, because I think that's the problem I have for the very hard clutch. But it works, but I might want to change that. But I also need to change the seal, which is coming from the gearbox through the differential to the clutch, because that seal is leaking. And while I was looking on how to detach everything, because there's quite a couple of bolts here, I noticed something that I didn't see before. And this is where we have the problem. We have a space frame which is connected to the die-cast part, and there's supposed to be a bolt through it. Now that bolt seems to be broken off. This will give you a little bit of a better view, and you can see here the space frame. This is supposed to be bolted down to the die-cast, but it's not any longer. The bolt is gone, it's finished, it's, I don't know, lost. And if I look inside the die-cast, I can see that there's still a piece of the bolt inside, so we'll have to tap it out with a reverse tap. I think this must have happened once we were in this spin on that curve, because then you get a lot of lateral forces. So folks, I hope that you enjoyed this video as much as I did, but of course it wasn't really great. Yeah, that's how it is sometimes. So I'll see you in my next video where we're going to fix all these issues.